Welcome to Nintendo Voice Chat for the week of May 21st, 2015. I am Jose Otero, and this is IGN's Nintendo Show. Joining me this week, Per Schneider.
Hi, Jose.
Samuel Claiborn. Welcome back.
What's up, everybody? Thank you so much.
And special guest, Chris Kohler from Wired.
Yes. So nice to be here again.
Oh, man, he's back. So,
Here
Chris.
Da-na-na-na.
Right, Chris Kohler appears, and Chris, I wanted you to talk about something that you mentioned to me before the podcast.
I did, yes.
A cool thing people need to know about.
Yes, this is an IGN Nintendo Voice Chat exclusive announcement. I know, the exclusives go over well here at IGN, so I wanted to have one too.
You brought your
before I
own
died.
for the show.
Exactly.
I like it.
So a question that I always get, I brought with me a copy. This is a book. I wrote it in the year 2004. It's called Power Up: How Japanese Video Games Gave the World an Extra Life, and it was published by Brady Games in 2004, and it went out of print in 2005. It's very hard to get your hands on this these days. People keep asking me, when is it coming back? When is it coming back? I am here to say Power Up is coming back March 2016 via Dover Publications. We are doing a second edition. We are not touching the material that's already there. I have to just deal with it.
You're not fixing any typos?
I'm not. Well, we're gonna. Yeah, actually, where there are actually very small, like little errors and typos, we're fixing it. But in general, we're not changing the book itself. And this also means that it's going to be available for the very first time in ebook format. Cool. Because who buys books anymore? And actually,
this is the book that got me to play Ico, by the way.
What? There. See, so we're changing lives.
Let me tell you, actually, this game changed my life in a very real way. I bought this, or actually, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she bought it for me for my birthday.
And that's how you know
from GameStop.
That's how you know she's a keeper, by the way.
I've
she
been
buys you Power Up.
I know. Yeah. I was looking at it a lot, and she bought it at GameStop, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
And I read it, and then I used it on my my end of college big research paper. I got my degree in creative nonfiction writing, so I was writing about games, and I was really interested in getting a job at IGN. I'd looked at resumes at IGN, or not resumes, I'd looked at job descriptions, and I was like, I'm going to do this. Here's what I need to do, and I got my degree, and I got a little job at a PBS channel locally, but I was really interested in writing about games. So I was like, I couldn't believe after reading David Sheff's book, Game Over, that there was another book out there that I could read right after that, and this was it. And it just happened to be the book I read, and I used it in my paper. I cited it quite a bit. And it was totally an honor to meet you eventually, because it's really great. It's the story of Japanese video games and why they changed the U.S. game industry. And I just thought that was a really cool way to tell it. My favorite thing was the chapter about how Donkey Kong was the first game to tell a story in a meaningful way. I mean, you talk about Pac-Man stuff in there, the cutscenes, but I just thought that was a really interesting type of game writing I never read in 2004. I mean, this is a long time ago.
It is a long time ago,
Thanks for writing this book. It meant a lot to me.
You make it feel old now.
Wow.
It feels like you're twice my age right now.
Right. Yeah.
But it totally got me into wanting to write about games.
Turn of the century. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I never knew that. Yeah. I never knew that, and
I have a very ratty copy of this on my shelf still. And we also, we included in this books you should read about games article we do around the holidays every year. So I'm glad it's back in print, because we had plugged it before. I wrote a little write up on IGN about it, and then nobody was able to get it.
Now you can actually. I wish you could plug it for this holiday season, but everything we had to delay it. Yeah, exactly. Everything gets delayed.
So my understanding is this book was based off of your graduation thesis, which was called, correct me if I'm wrong, the Cinematic Japanese Video Game.
Indeed.
And this is when you studied at Tufts University in Massachusetts.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about approaching this thesis. I mean, at the time, we're talking 2002. I still roughly there. I'm guessing, right? Early 2000.
Yeah.
I feel like video games in most schools still wasn't something that I feel like was very discussed on campus. At least not
totally how it was.
In the academic sense, discussed on campus. So why don't you talk a little bit about sort of approaching this thesis and sort of deciding this is what I want to do.
Video game. It was a couple of years. It was only a couple of years after this. Very there's a very well known in these circles event that took place at MIT in the year 2000 that I got to go to, and it was Henry Jenkins, the guy who ran MIT's Media Lab at the time, did an academic conference about video games. Wow. It was the first time this had really ever been done. Gabe Newell went there. Gabe Newell, Warren Spector was there. A lot of people who were going to be really changing the video game industry were at this conference. And it was just really at that time that games were kind of starting to attract that level of academic attention. But it was very, very, very weird for me in the Japanese program at Tufts University to go and say, I want to study video games. I want to do my graduation thesis on Japanese video games. But I had great mentors there who, they were very well versed in Japanese film and other aspects of Japanese visual culture. I mean, I took a class my sophomore year about Japanese visual culture, and I'm like, oh man, video games just dovetail into Japan.
Was it talked about in the class?
Centuries.
Were video games talked about in the class?
Yeah, a little bit towards the end.
That's what my Japanese pop culture classes always were. It was always like a bunch of manga and anime stuff.
Yeah.
Never really talked about games. So it was great to be able to write about that for those classes and be hopefully introduce the professor to that angle.
Right, and we started with ukiyo-e and the woodblock prints, that sort of thing,
which are so pop looking. They're crazy
absolutely.
cool.
Oh yeah, of
absolutely.
course.
So someone who doesn't know what that means, why don't you give them the elevator pitch? Like someone listening who doesn't know.
There was just one on the last few episodes of Mad Men, the print of the octopus pleasuring a woman, but they're not all like that. But there was that sort of a sexual element to a lot of them, yeah, for sure. But it just basically, I was learning in school that Japan just had this incredibly, if the development of Western popular culture was based around the word, based around the novel, then the development of Japanese culture and popular culture was absolutely prized the image for centuries, for a millennium even, and sort of the light bulb goes off in my head. It's like, oh man, well that's why Japan grew these amazing video game creators who were so fluent, I think, in the medium from its very beginnings, is because they just grew up not with words, but they grew up with pictures and they grew up with manga, and everybody read manga.
All
so
our
it totally
favorite
made sense to me.
video game designers from that era can sketch you a perfect image of the characters they invented.
Yeah.
They're amazing visual artists, and they painted with pixels. When in the U.S. you get games like Adventure, where it's just this is representational cave painting type stuff.
Yeah, it's programmer art, and people,
art, exactly.
and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, people were doing amazing things. I mean, Adventure is this that created the console adventure game genre from out of which grew Legend of Zelda. But you had to be a computer programmer. But in Japan, you saw guys like Miyamoto, who had absolutely no idea what he was doing. He could not program a computer, but he could design a video game, and you saw those guys getting elevated in Japan first.
So cool.
Yeah.
But a lot of that's covered in this book, and I do recommend it.
Exactly, and so that's what I was really trying to get at. There's so many books now about video games.
I know,
in 2004 when this
exploded.
came out, there were very,
that's
very
what I'm saying.
few.
I read Game Over, and I had books about old arcade games and histories and stuff like that, but very little. And this is still a hard book to do because you can't really talk to people in Japan about the games they made back in the day very easily, especially at Nintendo.
It was impossible in 2004. I'll tell you, I was incredibly lucky because first of all, when I wrote this book, I didn't have a job yet, so nobody really had to talk to me. And for some really strange reason, I met Miyamoto at an E3, and I kind of mentioned that I had studied in Kanazawa, which in Japan, that's where he went to college. I tried to just make that connection. And when I moved to Kyoto, I was a Fulbright scholar. I did a Fulbright scholarship to do this book, and I moved to Kyoto and I wrote to Miyamoto, and I was just like, hey, so can I do an interview with you? And for some weird reason, he actually responded and was like, yes. Come to Nintendo's office and we can do an interview for this.
Great.
It was one of the most extensive interviews with Miyamoto. It lasted hours. Yeah. It was one of the most extensive interviews with him to that point that had ever been done. I read for this book every interview with Miyamoto. There were not that many interviews.
There were
with
weird
Miyamoto.
ones from Nintendo Power and stuff.
Yeah,
and really dinky little interviews.
And it was just and there was a lot of companies just shut me down. They just shut me down. I was not able to make any headway with Square Enix at all to talk to Sakaguchi or anything like that. Wow. And so I just had to piece together the scraps of information that I had, which is again part of the sort of embarrassing part of putting it back out there again. It's the level of scholarship, the level of journalism, of reporting on these games has just gone exponentially since then. But I really want to get it back out there. So
right. It feels like we know so much about these game creators now that when you're scheduling an interview, you kind of get trapped in the, well, I guess we'll talk about your latest game and try to find some of the topics, right? Because we've explored them so much, but back then, obviously, there was...
I love even today trying to Shanghai interviews with... I did an interview... Remember when Donkey Kong Country came around for the Wii and Kensuke Tanabe was going around doing interviews for that?
He made Super Mario Brothers 2.
He made Super Mario Brothers 2. Nobody had ever asked him about that. So I took up half the interview asking him about Super Mario Brothers 2, and the guy says to me, the guy says to me, "Go back and read this interview." I'm like, "So what's up with, why did you go make, even Metroid Prime?" And he was like, "Oh, well, I went to make Metroid Prime because I developed an alcohol problem, and they were like, if we start sending maybe if we send this guy to America,
Texas.
It'll kind of break him out of his routine a little bit." And like he was,
it was punishment.
And it's like nobody had asked him these questions before. And so it's so frustrating and sad when a lot of these stories are going away.
Yeah,
So
and obviously the challenge, and we get this more so in the entertainment world when we interview movie stars, is the moment you veer off topic, there's somebody in the room and says, no, we're just gonna talk about this game right now, or this movie right now.
And that always happens in video games too.
It's a bummer.
I try to sneak it in as much as I can. Oh, for sure.
The translator will shut you down in some cases.
Yeah.
No, sorry,
That's
we
what
can't
happens
talk
to
about
Nintendo
that.
a lot.
So you visited Nintendo then as a Fulbright scholar. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? Sort of you went to the White Room, I'm assuming, where they just
the White Room. That's the one.
No one. There's nothing in there.
I never got any further than the White Room, which was sort of amazing. A woman came out with little tiny glasses of tea and little snacks and things like that she brought out.
This is in that iconic Kyoto white-faced building.
Yes, and I actually went twice. The first time was as soon as I got there, and I sat down with Miyamoto, and I was very confident that I didn't need a translator, and that was wrong. But we had really great conversations that make up part of the book. And then I went back with Mr. Miyamoto and his longtime translator, Mr. Minagawa, who you always say, really tall guy, really smart, really sharp translator,
and only translates half of what Miyamoto says.
During this interview, he absolutely nailed every single thing, for sure.
He says no.
No, yeah.
But that's when we did the really crazy long-ranging kind of interview, and I got down to everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a super huge trip to be 22, 23, and wander into Nintendo's office. And then, a couple blocks away from Nintendo's current offices is the old Nintendo playing cards building, which, if you know how to find it, if you wander down enough side streets,
I think you tweeted that out recently
make a
on Google
pilgrimage.
Maps.
Yeah.
You found the Google map.
I walked there by memory on Google Maps
really
Street View.
Yeah.
And it's got that metal sign on the door, right?
Oh, once you get there, you know it, because there's a sign in English that says the Nintendo Playing Card Company. It's unmistakable. But places don't have addresses in Japan.
Yeah.
So
it looks like an old firehouse or something, too. It's an old, just brick, non-distinct building.
And they don't lock their doors in Japan in general. Nobody locks their front doors because the front door to your house is not the gateway to your house. Yeah, seriously. The front door to your house is not the gateway to your house. The entryway, past the entryway, that's the gateway. So when you have a random visitor, they just walk right into your entryway and they say, "Hi, are you here?" So Nintendo, that building, they didn't lock the door. So I waltzed right in, and I go in, and I mean, it's like going into the somebody the tomb of King Tutankhamun. The walls, it's a small little lobby, but the walls are all covered with these ancient 150-year-old playing cards.
Wow.
All the old Nintendo Hanafuda are all on the walls. It's super dark in there, and I'm just looking around and just my jaw is dropping at all this stuff. and then I see there's an old man sitting in an office in the corner who turns to me and says in Japanese, "No field trips." And I'm like, "Whoops!" And I walked right out of there.
That's probably his job all day.
The next time that I
field
went,
trips guy.
The next time I went back, they'd started locking the doors.
Oh, Chris.
You ruined your
So I ruined it for everybody.
Locks in Japan, you can pick from just one specific type of lock. So you bring your lock pick and you put it out.
Yeah, they don't use credit cards a lot there, so they have no idea about that trick.
My last question to you would be about you do have to defend your thesis, correct?
Yes.
So what was that like? I mean, you were defending a thesis about video games.
Yeah, it wasn't so bad.
You didn't get a wedgie? Nobody gave you a wedgie?
What is school like where you come from?
Germany?
I'm from Germany. It's all fun.
Yeah.
This book is about the art and storytelling and stuff like that, concepts that were probably pretty easy for your professors to grasp.
Exactly. The people I was defending the thesis against were professors that I'd worked with for years, and so I knew what they knew, and so it was really sort of putting it into context of, this is an advancement of the work that you're doing. So I ended up, I did okay. I graduated.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah.
There's a happy ending to this story. Tell folks where they could buy this book again.
So very soon, in the next days, weeks, I mean, there should be listings appearing on Amazon, Barnes & Noble for the new version, which is by Dover Publications, so you can pre-order it. I don't want you to think that you have to pre-order it. These are not amiibos. These are not, there's no GameStop exclusive chapter. Like, don't worry about that.
Okay.
You don't have to pre-order it, but you can if you want to. And then actually, if you you might even be able to wait, because Dover on their actual website, once the book comes out, we'll do bundles where you can buy the paperback version and the ebook version for like a significantly reduced price. Okay. So that might be a good thing for, if you're a collector like me and you just want to put something on the shelf and then never actually touch it. Yeah. Like amiibos.
Yeah.
Hey, but if you ever write a paper for school, it's better to have the hard copy.
If you ever write a paper to school, I really suggest that you try to get it published as a book and get some money for it.
No, I'm saying if you need to write a paper and cite this, like I did.
Oh, it's better to have the hard copy so you can bring it in, basically, and be like, this book really exists.
Yeah.
True
Do you
enough.
ever approach a book about Nintendo again, or about Japanese video games again? I know you did retro video game hacks, which wasn't that.
Yeah, I love the idea of like writing another book, but at this point in my life, in 2004, it was really easy because I didn't have a job, as I said, so I had a whole lot of time to do it. At this point, it's like I have a lot on my plate. Right. So maybe one day before I die, totally.
But they're really
for now,
interesting.
I'm gonna write a new chapter for this book.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You should get Andy Eddie to do it.
I will have Andy Eddie do it. Absolutely.
There you
Yes.
go. No, I mean, there's so many interesting stories to be told about Japanese development now, right? Like you see, it's like the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Look at Konami, right?
Yeah.
And certainly Nintendo has seen its ups and downs, and like
I wrote this book. I finished off this book just as Japan in general was about to go off a cliff, right?
Yeah.
As far as their influence worldwide, and also the domestic Japanese video game console industry in general. And then also I wrote this book just as Nintendo was about to emerge from its 2004 total obscurity into just world beating with the DS and yeah.
Wow. Very cool.
So it was really ill-timed. The whole thing was just terrible timing.
Like your last sentence is like, and thus the company is doomed.
Yes, well, actually,
they're about to announce the Wii.
I will tell you, in this book, there is a section towards the end at which I talk about. This is true. The possibly Japanese games helping out with the gender gap, which I think it absolutely did. Okay. And then there is a section called "Is Simpler Better?" in which Satoru Iwata talks about what the game industry needs are simpler, more accessible video games, and that absolutely spelled out what Nintendo was about to do. So
that's cool.
It was in there,
and every iOS developer ever.
Well, of course,
They
yes.
followed suit.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Chris, for sharing that with us. And
Thank you for allowing me to do that. Yes.
Absolutely. All right. So let's jump into then some Splatoon impressions. We've all been playing it. We're in the middle of reviewing it, I guess, because it comes out on May 29th in North America. I think on the 28th if you're in Japan and Australia and you're listening to this. And there's another global test fire coming up, so I'm sure people still want to hear more impressions of Splatoon. So anything's open in campaign. There is a limitation on nothing past World 3.
Yeah.
That we can talk about.
We can't
anything
talk
with
about
multiplayer.
But
So take it off.
I mean, I was really, after knowing everything about Splatoon and everything, the big unknown for me was single player. So the fact that I've been playing it and enjoying it is that's, I think, really good. I like that they spent some time on making cool puzzles in single player and that it feels good. I can't talk about the later stuff.
The single player Splatoon
is
like Super Mario Galaxy 3 with paint, with ink. It's first of all, as you play through levels, you realize they are laid out absolutely like Mario Galaxy levels.
They totally are. The star that shoots you to another planet.
Right. So that works. And they're really brilliant. Each individual level, it's just very much like Mario Galaxy, has one unique thing, and then it does that thing from teaching you how to do it to raising the challenge to giving you one last challenge, and then you move on to the next level, and it's a totally different thing.
That's right.
From just totally different applications of using the paint from. I don't want to mention things because I forget what world they're in, but there's No, I'm not even going to mention it.
But it's like the puzzles build on each other too, right? Like when you encounter the first boss, it establishes this visual and functional style of how this boss functions. Then you encounter the second one, and it kind of builds on the concept that you've learned, which is vintage Nintendo. And I will say I thought the single player was going to be much more kind of like a slightly more elaborate single player version of fighting bots in order to beat a level, and it's not. It's it's very different. It is much more like a Galaxy without the the focus on jumping.
Yeah.
It's about getting to a place or beating a boss. It's not about like clear out all the enemies in an area.
Yeah,
Right.
The levels that do have the the Octarian bots though, the female-looking
The
Octarian
Octodads.
bots.
Yeah.
Those are probably the more forgettable levels of the game, and they do reuse that idea.
That's what I was
points to the
afraid it was
token
gonna
flaw.
be. Yeah,
which is. And to be fair, though, I feel like a lot of companies that make shooters struggle with, sort of how difficult AI is to fight and sort of the behaviors around AI. Like, obviously, Halo got it right. The minute you fight an elite in, like, Halo, you notice and you know that it's reacting to everything you're doing, whereas the Octarians just kind of run up to you and don't really show any sort of preservation.
And defeating them doesn't feel special.
It doesn't.
Right? Like that's one of the issues. It's like if you know how to beat the first bot and then more come, it's not an amazing experience.
Right. So I don't mind it getting
Yeah.
it gets sprinkled. I think there's so far there seems to be like just one of those per world. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's all right.
I'm
You
with you.
guys,
It's not an issue.
Like in playing online, which I haven't at all. Have you guys noticed people that are like really, really talented at like moving through the Splatoon world?
Oh, yeah.
Because they make them like skate parks. And in my experience with single player and at events and stuff like that, like I feel like I'm not moving the right way for these worlds.
You can learn by watching others play, and like because the areas are confined, like you'll notice some, like you fall through grates, right? If you turn into a squid, you'll fall through grates, and like you can use all that to your advantage, like shooting somebody and then falling through the grate when somebody attacks you back, or like swimming or like splattering a pillar and then swimming up the pillar and being basically the sniper on the tower, like. All of that stuff
cool.
you learn by observing other players.
But people aren't moving around like Tony Hawk or something, like really, really fluidly.
I have the occasional game where I'm pretty good, and I've seen other games where I feel.
I feel like there
I
needs to be,
think
like,
it
a
matters
speed
by
boost or something.
by weapon though. Like I think the question ultimately is answered by what weapon are you using? Because I think that plays a big role in your strategy.
Okay.
For example, like the splat roller, leaves this lane of paint behind you. You're able to sort of paint areas very quickly. But if you see another enemy, okay, I need to retreat. Like your first impulse, if they're facing you, is never to
if they're
attack.
facing you, get out of the way.
Yeah.
If they're turned away from you,
Go
you
for
can
it.
kill them instantly.
Yeah.
I've actually just been using Splat Roller since I got the Splat Roller. I've been really enjoying it because what happens is the match starts off and everybody runs every which direction, and I just meticulously paint our base. I just paint everything in the base because turf is turf. First of all, depending on the map, it's really unlikely that anybody's going to get up there in the first place. They stop you from kind of spawn camping, so you can freely kind of paint a lot of the area around your base without really having to worry. And then at that point, I will say this. I don't like it when Nintendo forces you to use a certain controller without really needing it. I do appreciate that you can only use the gamepad in the situation because I do find myself constantly referencing that map because I glance out at the map and I'm like, okay, what needs to happen? What isn't the enemy doing? Where didn't they go?
Yeah.
Did the enemy forget to paint some of the sort of nooks and crevices around their base? If they did, I'm going to try to sneak past everybody. I'm going to try to squid through this ink past everybody and paint some of the stuff that they're forgetting to paint.
The map is crucial because we talked about it, how it is really the most brilliant setup for a kind of capture the flag, right? Like where the very color of the arena and the ground determines whether you're in the lead or not. And you have a constant frame of reference, but not to the point where you can't turn around the game. And what's amazing is the tension that arises when you see, oh my God, they're back in our camp. And like the color, you just see the color, right? You don't always see the enemy. You see the color taking over. You're like,
Well, that's what enters your mind immediately the second you haven't seen an enemy in a while. You're just like, well, they're back in our base. And you glance down at the map and then you realize it. I will say this, though,
that
too.
they've painted over a lot of your area.
A lot of it. But the more you play the maps that this game ships with, the more you are quick to identify from that top-down perspective on the gamepad, what are the crucial control points? What are the areas that, okay, if we control the lower rectangle and most of the upper rectangle in like Salt Spray Rig, I think is the name of the place, something like that. Immediately we've got this map.
Yeah, Salt Spray Rig is really interesting because that's one of, I think, in which painting your whole base is important because you can jump off of that area, but getting back up onto it is really difficult.
That's right.
So the chances of the enemy getting back up into your base area are very low. Yeah. So you really should paint that whole thing because nobody's going to come up there and mess with it and then just forget about it for the rest of everything and concentrate on those two, the square in the top and the square in the bottom. But the thing is, the pathways to those places, those are just going to get painted over again and again and again. So you really don't want to worry about that until, I think we were talking about before the podcast, that 30 seconds at the end, when you think to yourself, okay, we only have 30 seconds, so anything I paint, there's a good chance it's actually not going to get painted over again. So now it's sort of like I'm going to run a path with my splat roller and just try to paint over as much of the other color as I possibly can, very willy-nilly, in the hopes that's... I mean, there have been some matches where we've won it by a couple of percentage points. And you can kind of look down and I can see the path that I took just running around where nobody else was at that point.
Yeah, and I love when you're following a splat roller. Like if a splat roller is in front of you and they are oblivious of your existence and they paint the ground and you're just behind them and paint over it. It's like the old Pink Panther cartoon.
Well, that was what I was talking about, actually. When I have been using the splat roller, I also like to notice when another splat roller is behind me, because I do play a game of chase where I'm like, oh yeah, I don't see you. Dip into the ink, swing back around, get rid of them, paint over again and again. And I will say I appreciate as well that each category of weapon, when they make these small changes to the weapons, it ultimately impacts the way you play. So, for example, if you have the splatter shot, which is the gun that you see the amiibo holding, it's sort of a mid-range rifle, right? Whereas there's a long-range version that doesn't quite fill in the area closest to you as quickly. So you don't want to focus on, I'm not painting the same way with this brush, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Because if I do, it's taking me longer to do that, and I'm honestly more effective if I'm helping paint other areas that are at a long distance. Tons of strategy, and I do like that Nintendo kind of picked up on that. In a shooter today, it's not enough to just have cool weapons and dump them into a map and you're done. Right? Like mobility plays a big part in how these matches unfold, and being smart on how you move is part of that.
So that my issue with the E3 demo, right? Like I came out of E3 and I'm like, yeah, this could be a good game, but I wasn't feeling it yet.
Right.
Like I wasn't that impressed, and like a lot of our fans, I think, said, it looks great. What are you guys talking about? Right? Like as the person having played it, I didn't really like the way the gun felt and like the kind of sense you got from taking out an enemy. But like now with the variety, and I think the roller really made that game for me. The first time you just roll, it just feels so intuitively wonderful, and seeing the paint effects and everything just splatter, it's just like a little hooked at that point.
If all you want to do is try to stealth and paint when nobody is noticing, and you don't really, if you don't want to get into one-on-one conflicts with other enemies that much, then that is a good weapon to grab.
And that's what I think is ultimately what makes this game so special, is that even that contribution is huge to your team winning the game.
Now the problem with this is, here on this podcast called Nintendo Voice Chat, is that the game does not have voice chat. And it is a heavily strategic game.
And we're not allowed to talk about that.
And I sorry?
No, I say we're not allowed to talk about that.
We're not allowed to talk about that.
No. He's joking. He's joking.
No, people are divided when we bring up that issue, right? There are a lot of Nintendo fans who say, whenever I go online and hear somebody in voice chat, they're nasty people, so I don't want to hear them. They're not talking about the friendly experience, right? Like, we love that experience of like playing with friends.
I'm not saying that like I'm going to force people to listen to whatever randos they end up in this match with. Of course, then again, Nintendo really would be saying that, because I mean another issue is that like right now you can't even like pick a team of people and play with those people.
Right
like
now.
you can play with just your friends if you want to.
They are.
They are. And the thing is, they've already kind of preemptively said, in August we're going to roll out matchmaking and lobbies and teams and things.
That's a weird thing to delay.
And they have to at that point add weapon set swapping. While you're waiting. Like I feel like the bigger than the limitation of the voice chat, because like sometimes I just love leaning back playing and not having to worry about talking to anybody. The moment Jose pops into my team or into my enemy group, I'm like, man, I sure would love to say hi.
Or
tell him,
or tell him, hey, I'm gonna go buy a new weapon right now. Come on out of the room, because otherwise there's no chance I can ever find him again.
The problem is people are gonna use Ventrilo, or people are gonna use some chatting Skype or whatever it is service, and they're going to be dominating online if you're playing in ranked battles. They're gonna be talking to each other.
That could totally unbalance the game.
Right.
Somebody is just simply.
People are gonna be, oh my god, how are they working together so well?
Yeah.
So
I just want to be able to tell everybody, like, hey everybody, I have a roller, I'm painting our base. Go. Or I want to be able to tell everybody, hey everybody, like, draw all the enemies up to the front and I'll sneak into their base and paint it. If I could just let people know what I'm doing, we could be much more effective.
What's it like going from Destiny to to Splatoon and
Well,
back.
I only talk to my friends in Destiny, so it's not really that different. Like if I'm playing like something
like
that's
you've been playing
match-made.
Destiny nonstop, though.
I have, yeah. Oh no, I mean they're unique in their own way, right? Although I am impressed that Splatoon does have like gear re-rolling, for example, and things like that. Like the gear plays an important role. It's not just sort of to make each one of us like look really cool.
Oh yeah.
There are actual little perks involved, and I think that was really smart that they picked up on that they picked up on mobility. I mean, Destiny is more loot driven if the loot is compelling you enough to stay on the game. Whereas with Splatoon, I feel like there is something a bit different happening in every multiplayer match. Like I'm not a big fan of Destiny PvP. I absolutely adore Splatoon PvP. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you
yeah,
go.
but
yeah,
I'm no
Destiny.
expert, you know?
Destiny. I mean, I played a ton with Jose, and it was really about the camaraderie of like working together, trying to overcome like the AI enemy. And like so, it's a very different game, and that one really lives off of voice chat because of the collaboration. And like at launch, that's not going to be built into Splatoon. The collaboration aspect, because you're not going to we could be friends, but we might not be on the same team. I will say, like, I was surprised at the level of progression in Splatoon, because I had initially thought it would be more like a Mario Kart with more maps open in the beginning. You just jump in, and like basically what you get in the beginning of the game is the same as what you get later. Well, you unlock more characters in Mario Kart, but like the weapons stay the same, right? And in this game, like you get new abilities, you get new specials that you hadn't
New
seen.
weapon sets,
In the very beginning, you can't even get the roller, right? Like you have to earn the right to get the roller. At level 10, you can enter ranked matches, which
That's
you
like
can.
kind of
so-
par for multiplayers, competitive games.
But I didn't expect this in Splatoon. I thought
Really?
Nintendo would play it much more like a Mario Kart.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
we're just everybody got to use everything.
Yeah, but
Well,
even in Mario
Mar-
Kart, everything unlocks over time.
Yeah.
Sorry, like you do need to build up sort of a coin.
you need to play it by
amount.
yourself a lot.
Yeah.
Stages, yeah, and this one is
If you
more.
want that gold
No,
card,
I'm
that's
talking
so
about
good.
the carts. Yeah, exactly what Sam's talking
Oh,
about.
that's
the
right. Yeah,
wheels,
no,
the
it
cart
does have
parts, and
that,
the
yeah.
glider.
But the cart, I mean, getting cart parts in Mario Kart is more of sort of a lateral kind of shift. Like,
Plus,
it's like,
they were
okay, well,
randomized in the last one.
do you want to use a motorcycle with huge wheels? It's like
Yeah.
that's not necessarily going to give you a distinct advantage over somebody else. But in this case, it's like gear that ups your defense. It's not a lateral move. It's really it's climbing. So I mean, that's why they want you to just keep playing the game, so you can keep leveling up, so you can keep getting better stuff. They're trying to effectuate that sort of positive cycle.
Yeah.
And then what they want to do is, when people get sick of the fact that they can only, I mean, another thing is they're cycling these maps out randomly.
How do you feel about that?
I mean,
Well, that's for the beta, though.
No.
No, it's retail. Yeah, every
Retail.
4 hours, it's going to shift in a new set of maps for each mode. There are only 2 modes shipping one technically shipping when this comes out. Ranked play opens later on once the community has reached a certain number,
Right,
and then
which will
2
be
more
pretty
modes
fast.
are coming between now and
You can't ever
potentially
vote on a
August.
map or something like that?
No,
Don't vote on maps
Only
ever.
no,
Yeah.
only 2 maps are ever available for
One mode.
for battle.
So in the Capture the Territory game that you guys like a lot, you play that same map a whole lot.
2 maps, yeah, and
Well,
like.
it's 2 maps and it just goes back and
Yeah.
forth between
But
them.
you
and then
can't
4
pick.
hours later, another one will come in.
But that was a limitation. I thought I was going to be super annoyed at that limitation, but honestly,
It doesn't sound too
just playing over and over and over, like I didn't get sick of the maps.
But maybe
honestly.
you will.
I mean, the one thing I will say,
in 3 weeks, though.
I wish I would know what map I'm getting, because I would use the roller on certain ones and not
Yeah.
on
They
other
don't
ones.
show you
like
ahead of
the-
time.
I don't know what. Well,
Yeah.
they do tell you what maps are going to be in the rotation.
Okay,
But
I
you
don't
don't
know
know
what
which
problem
one.
they're trying to solve
Yeah.
with this. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
that
really.
is a weird decision to make.
Typically, when
definitely.
Nintendo does something weird, it's like, oh, well, they're trying to solve such and such a problem. I'm really confused as
Like
to what the
Pear,
problem
I know
is.
doesn't like the skate park. So, for example, there's a lot
With
of
the
ramps
roller.
there, and the roller just doesn't go
Oh,
up the inclines
sure.
very well.
That's
You
right,
have
yeah.
to kind of sort of paint the lowest area possible, or jump to higher areas.
And you were
flick.
saying what you want is when as you're waiting there for a match to start, you want to be able to play with your logo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, ideally, I want to see who's on my team so that I can already
Right.
say, hey, we've got 3 rollers on the team.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah.
go
We don't
for a
wanna go
different
with
gun,
3
right?
rollers.
Like,
Yeah,
it
true.
does, I will say, it somehow charmingly works out, because
Yeah.
like sometimes you're like, oh God, we all have the same gun. And then you win and it's a great victory. And like
Yeah.
it somehow works. And they did a really nice job balancing it. I thought I was going to hate the 2 map limitation, but like after playing like game after game for hours, I actually noticed I'm like, wait, I don't have a huge problem with it. Right
Yeah, I
now.
don't
What I-
really
what-
mind. But
What I do
yeah.
have a problem with is the freaking like
Squid
street
sisters.
street pass game effect of having to sit through the cutscene with the Squid sisters.
yeah.
Like you start the game off, the game's super fun, right? So I want to jump in right away, and I get a text only blah 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 cutscene saying today's maps are, and like it makes you sit through that whole thing. Like all you had to say.
I will say for now, I really do like that they used the skip style of text of I don't know what you even call it, the sort of the
it's
randomized
called something in Animal
grunts.
Crossing. It's called like Babel or there's a name for
Animalese.
it.
But it's
Animalese.
Yeah, but it's more.
Babelese,
But it's more sound. It more sounds like Chibi Robo and Giftpia and Skip games. Yeah,
I like that. No, I have no problem with the style, and freaking Tuxedo Cat is amazing, right? Like all the characters are really cute.
All the characters are great. I mean, this is so frustrating. I mean, reading the Iwata asks about this, or they underscore. Oh yeah, these are the first characters that EA has done in 14 years, or EAD has done in 14 years. They're so good at it. You know, like they're so great. These are great characters. And it's just so frustrating that this organization within Nintendo is just tasked with only just doing Mario and Zelda games forever, because when they actually do original new characters, look at how the community responded to the Splatoon characters.
That's right.
Squid is awesome.
With just all the fan art and the enthusiasm that's happened after E3. They're designed so well. The Squid is great.
Generic names.
And the bosses too.
Yeah. Say that.
The bosses, the boss fights are great. Everything is
we
really,
talked about that.
It
is a pity that they don't spend the extra time to say, hey, we're going to really make this a character, give the character a name and build him up, right? It is you're still getting boy and girl. I'm sure that will change over time, but like they're very old school that way. It's like I mean
they let you customize your boy and girl characters with skin tones, which again is I look at Splatoon and I see Nintendo listening, I think, to Western fans. Because when the skin tone argument kind of happened during Animal Crossing, people were just like, I want my villager to look like me, not because we both wear a green shirt, but because I want him to have dark skin, or whatever. You can do that. You can make a character that is black as night in Splatoon, which is awesome.
Yeah. No, as someone who noticed that in Animal Crossing, I will say that was a bummer. And the answer was sit in the sun for like 8 hours. I'm like, no, I'm not leaving my 3DS out.
Yeah, exactly.
Like for that long.
I'm not suntanned.
I'm tan for life.
Latino. Right.
People said that?
Pretty much.
They recommend the suntan technique in Animal Crossing?
No, that was the answer I stumbled upon because I looked through
your gamma
places. I looked on the IGN wiki. All right, so that's about it for Splatoon, unless anyone has anything else to add.
Well, these amiibo are really cute.
Yeah, we have them here on the
we did
table.
an unboxing today, and everybody should check it out. Even if you're not interested in these designs, like I'm a little bit iffy on these designs. I don't think they're that great, but I really like the amiibo build quality, and they're just like really cool looking.
Yeah, and
I
look
like
at
the
the
squid.
stand on this squid, man. Like we are
there's like a splash of paint on all of the bases, which is really cool.
We are light years from the Zelda, the Link P stand gold thing.
I think they actually designed. First of all, I think there's a lot of things we can say about the design of the amiibos. One, they're clearly actually designed to be figures and stand up and not have to have ridiculous. I'm holding Pit from Kid Icarus here with his little stand.
Yeah, the poses from Smash Brothers are from a video game. So these ones are designed to be toys.
They're more simply done, and I think that's going to help Nintendo. I certainly hope that Splatoon amiibos are not super hard to find. I actually don't think they will be.
They seem to be common.
I think they've done them. I think they can make more of these on a shorter time frame because they're not so ridiculously overly elaborate like the Smash Brothers.
I can't believe they have a clear tank for the ink, and you can see the ink inside.
They got a little ink canister on the back that's see-through with paint in it.
They're still really cool figures for sure.
Yeah, even the splash of paint on the base was also a really, really good touch, because I know that was one of your disappointments with the Smash series, that the base itself wasn't something on par with like a Skylanders, where it's a little bit of a set. It all fits.
Yeah, I never liked the coin as a stand for the Smash Brothers characters. I wish it was a piece of that character's level, the way that the Skylanders are designed. But I mean, they're serviceable, but these are much better. I mean, look at the squid has a big paint splash at the bottom.
When they reissue the girl, they can make her nose into a little painted on triangle instead of a sticking out triangle.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
That's what they do with Villager.
All right, cool. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about some news, and then we will be done with the show. We'll be right back.
It's a long show.
Yeah. Welcome back. Jose Otero here with Sam Claiborn, Per Schneider, Chris Kohler, and we are talking about the Nintendo World Championships. What year is it? What year is it?
It's 2015.
It's not even an anniversary of the championships.
The first time in what?
24 years.
24?
25 years.
25
right?
years since the Nintendo World Championships.
Well, they had them in 1990. Yeah.
So
the card is from 92 though.
No, the card's from 1990.
Okay, so it's 25
So
years.
it's the 25th anniversary,
Yep. For the first time during E3, Nintendo will basically host the finals of this thing. The Sunday of that week, apparently, is when they're rolling this out at some partner stores. I believe. Is it only Best Buy?
It's like 8 Best Buy locations, right?
Okay.
Around the U.S.
Yes,
One of the bigger Best Buys.
Most of them are in California.
Yeah, that too. It's going to be a short
not a
flight.
good
This is not, I mean, again, like they're calling it the Nintendo World Championships, and they have every right to do that.
Yeah.
But importantly, like when they did this in 1990, they went to like sports arenas, and they rented out. They had a lot more money then.
It was the height of Nintendo Mania.
Yeah, I mean they did these. It was big things. This is they're going one day. They're going to Best Buys, and you can go there and you can play the game.
It's a nostalgia play, right?
I'm not saying this is not a simple thing for them to do. This is a complicated thing that they're doing, but it's not as crazy as the 1990 ones. But it's still really cool. It's a cool idea.
Absolutely, it feels like definitely off of last year's Smash Bros. Invitational. Nintendo is very clued into. We need our fan support, and we have fan support. We should be using it. And so something like this being during E3, I think is a pretty cool thing for them, especially because their backs are against the wall with, the other consoles on the other side, iOS and smartphones on the other side. Although they're part of that market now, they're still not in it yet until those games show up.
Right, yeah.
Did you play the remix mode it's based on?
No, I did not.
So in NES Remix 2, there is a championship mode, which is like a reference to the Nintendo World Championships, the original 1991 ones, in which at that time it was you collect 25 coins in Super Mario Brothers, you beat the first level of Rad Racer, and then play Tetris for as long as you have left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's a great combination of games, and those aren't all made by Nintendo too, which is kind of interesting. But
only one of them was.
Yes,
they were all published by Nintendo.
But but this one is Dr. Mario, Super Mario Brothers, and Super Mario Brothers 3, and it's not as interesting of a mix, but it's really cool that they made that and then as a World Championship like thing, and now they're actually using it for a World Championship.
Right. And so
they're not using Splatoon and Smash Brothers and stuff.
The major difference between that competition and this one. You can practice for this competition.
Yes, you can.
You don't think there will be a surprise, like a game that nobody expects?
Oh, I mean, you can practice for the qualifiers.
Yeah.
You can practice for the qualifiers.
Well, Fred Savage still knew where the warp whistle was, even though
Which
he
was,
hadn't
of course,
practiced it.
not the Nintendo World Championships. That was Video Armageddon. And
It's
the major
also not
difference between that and
Nintendo.
this is that was fake.
Fred Savage didn't know where it was. The girl was shouting at him.
No, Fred Savage didn't play the games. Fred Savage's autistic younger brother, Jimmy
played
the games.
That's
No,
right.
you're committing the classic double dragon switcheroo. It's not Billy and Jimmy.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
But so the game sounds cool, and like I think that's really interesting. I want to know what the prize is. That's the most important thing.
Well, first of all, they haven't said what the prize is. They've said that they're going to pick 8 finalists, one from each of the Best Buy stores. Mm-hmm. Then there's 8 people that Nintendo is selecting and inviting to the competition, and they haven't said what. And they said the games they're playing at the competition are going to be different. Mm-hmm. So they haven't said what those are. They haven't said what the prize is. So
we're hoping it's
the prize is
some kind of limited video game.
It's going to be a new Mario Brothers.
Yeah,
it can just be a little Mac amiibo. That thing's worth like $100.
Yeah, we brought a friend of the show, Steve Lynn, on before, and he's brought his Nintendo World Championship cartridges to IGN. We did a thing, and of course, you brought some rare games too. We did the same show, but he has 2 of the original cartridges, the gray one and the gold one. There's 116 of them known to exist, and it's just amazing just to see something that is that rare from this competition back then. They have to simulate something.
And I mean, I think the takeaway from this for me is that they're using E3 to do something that is for gamers, right? Like E3 is the most wonderful place on earth for gamers with locked doors. Right? Like you can look in through our websites and our coverage, but this is actually for gamers,
Yeah, let's take a step back here. Nintendo has been rethinking E3 for a long time, and I think it's really kind of latched on to a lot of really good, really important things. I was very surprised coming back from E3 last year to hear so many people saying, "Oh my God, Nintendo, they ran E3. They absolutely ruled E3." It was
they did a live stream.
Really? Why did you think that? Yeah, because they did live streams of their games. Like, if I went to E3, I don't know jack about Xenoblade Chronicles X, but apparently they did a live stream at E3, which if you were at E3, you couldn't see it because you were at E3. But if you were sitting at home, you could watch this extensive live stream footage. And really, if you're at E3, if you're paying attention to E3 coverage, that's about the best coverage you can possibly get, is the developer and somebody from Nintendo just sitting down and doing an extensive playthrough.
Yeah, absolutely.
The digital event, not renting out a huge theater anymore, or renting out a huge theater, but doing it for a Smash Brothers competition, or you doing it for the Nintendo World Championships.
Or Steam, which was weird last year.
It's like, look, people,
that didn't
assembling the world's media and putting them into this theater, it's kind of almost counterproductive now. And in just saying, we're not going to do this anymore, and we're going to do all this other kind of weird stuff, it makes a lot more sense.
I hear you.
And they owned it really well. They put Miyamoto on camera. They got Tezuka on camera, like stuff that even we couldn't get as media, as people who were asking for this stuff to bring coverage to our audiences.
Yeah, here, pinball machine.
Yeah, that's an awesome ringtone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
They were able to roll that out, and it makes what we do kind of challenging, but at the same time, we offer a lot of opinion on that stuff, whereas you won't see that there.
Yeah, and that obviously, last year's E3 was amazing traffic for us. Lots of people came specifically for those opinions and get kind of like the follow-up coverage. I will say that
that's what we have to do now, right? But that is what we have to do.
Yeah, it's less about access and more about opinion and like giving people insight. No, but the one challenge with that approach is the retailer relationship and there is something about having the entire GameStop management team in your press conference and getting them excited about new product that's going to debut in the fall. And Nintendo does not have that factor right now. And I do think that is an issue for them, with E3. Now they can solve that with afterwards when they meet with these companies. Yeah. But at E3, that is the one factor that they're missing out on. And I do think that has an impact because Nintendo's retailer relationship is not awesome, and they're not excited about product.
We're not really retailers, so we don't really know what is Nintendo doing to go and supplement that, and try to show retailers this is how excited people are. Yeah. If they bring retailers by the booth, where Nintendo will still have tons of lines at the booth, they can show them the enthusiasm that's being generated without necessarily having to have an audience applaud for things at a press conference.
Yeah, not the same effect though. I will tell you.
But you know what? Yeah. That's going away though, because even Nintendo, which has always been a very traditional company. I mean, a lot of their, more and more of their sales are digital. Yeah. We're just moving towards this age where really it's companies interfacing with players rather than needing all the middlemen.
And they're watching the reactions on social networks. They're watching the reactions on Facebook, which can echo slightly louder only because it's not just contained to a conference hall.
And that's a good point, which is it's ironic that this E3 is probably the E3 with the most press conferences in a decade.
Oh, yeah.
There is now a Square conference.
You get a conference.
There's EA, there's Bethesda.
There's the PC conference, right? It's being run by PC Gamer.
Yeah.
There are lots of things.
Just to drive back to Nintendo World Championships for a real quick bit before we move on to one more thing about
everybody is trying to do a conference this year because the stakes are so much higher. Like these companies, they have maybe one or two games that they're going to release, and the delicious steaks. They have one or two games they're going to release, and it's getting to the point where they really have to make a huge splash with these games, or they're in big trouble. Yeah. So I think that's why you see this sort of very, very rickety house of cards being built, in which everybody is trying to make this gigantic splash now.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to end on was that Nintendo World Championship. Do you think that we'll possibly see the original ROM on Virtual Console? Do you think they end, or do they just quietly roll that out?
No, because I don't really think they want to If they were going to do it, they'd have done it. I don't think they want to go relicense Rad Racer from Square.
Plus, they'd have to build in the dip switch settings somehow. Which would be
right. I don't think they. And you know what? It did come out in Japan. If it had come out in Japan, maybe. Yeah. But it was really very much an American thing, and for them to try to convince the Japanese engineers to work on that, they're going to be like, "Why? Who cares?"
Yeah. They did add the pie level to Donkey Kong, which is pretty amazing. We should all just be happy with that.
It's true.
Yeah, so thinking of that. All right, and then lastly, we will end with one more E3 story, which is that we've learned Satoru Iwata will not be at E3 again in 2015. So last year, President of Nintendo Satoru Iwata missed E3 because of health concerns. He was advised by a doctor not to go. It ended up being a growth on his bile duct, which was kind of gross when that finally came out.
Yeah.
Too much information.
We're still seeing him sort of recover from that. Like, he looks a lot thinner for the last time, or excuse me, the first time we saw him, which was, I feel like, the Nintendo DNA conference, or maybe even the
last time was the
the
financial briefing that was just earlier this month.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. I mean, the first time we saw him.
He's still skinnier. That may be connected to his recovery from the disease. It may be he changed some things about his health. Yeah, exactly. Like, who really knows?
Yeah, but regardless, he chose to opt out of this one.
Well, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Important to remember, last year Nintendo said it was because of his health. That's what they said. This year Nintendo said that he has things keeping him in Japan. I mean, it may be ongoing health issues. It may not be. It may be absolutely that he just has other things to do in Japan, which is very, very strange. E3 is kind of huge and important.
But he'll be on the Direct and stuff, though.
He'll be on the Direct, but he films those in Japan.
It could also be cost savings, right? Like, that is, if you as a CEO want to make a statement about an event, right? Like, about your income, your earnings, you can say, hey, I'm not going to go to E3, and we have reduced footprint, blah, 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 right?
And it could simply be that by saying I'm not going to go to E3, it precludes any media outlet from wanting to get an interview with him, because they're just like, well, he's not at E3.
Yeah.
And there might be a reason for Nintendo to just not really want to have him doing too many like wide-ranging interviews about video games at this point, because maybe he doesn't really want to get asked about the NX because there's nothing to say yet. Maybe he doesn't want to get asked about smartphones from everybody because there's nothing to say. Maybe he doesn't want to get asked about like the fact that the Wii U isn't doing very well, because he doesn't want to. There's no good answer.
There's one more conspiracy theory, and that's when the leader of a company is on his way out, you are not putting them in front of the press.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and that could be again related to health. You could be looking at a early retirement at the end of the year because of health reasons or something. And so maybe they're keeping him out of the press because of that.
So he doesn't like drop the mic and just tell all.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I mean, really, who knows? You cannot simply take at face value what Nintendo says. It could be that, or it could be any number of other things. But it is a little weird when the CEO of Nintendo, when Iwata does not go to E3.
Yep.
No, build a little bit more on that. Why? Like, what specifically does that sort of say?
It's the biggest yearly event for the video games industry. Typically, all of your executives go out. That's where the executive, meets the press, and that's where the CEO goes there and talks to retailers and so much business gets done.
His peers in the Japanese game industry, I don't think they all just like come together for some reason anytime else. I mean, TGS, Nintendo doesn't even go to that.
Right.
This is the time for all Japanese developers to and people that are running the companies to all kind of see each other and meet each other. I mean, it's really important that he would be there. I would imagine.
I mean, it will still work because they do pre-record stuff for their media briefings, right? So you will get some FaceTime from him
be a hologram
in the
year.
show. It might be a hologram. Projected from earrings.
I mean, they're going to miss out on him being able to take all the meetings that he usually takes at E3, but. I don't know. I mean,
it's going to miss out on the IGN interview. I mean, come on.
It could just simply be that they realize that just they gain more by having him at home and not having to worry about scheduling interviews or meetings with him. Or it could be that he's been advised to not travel for health reasons again, but they don't want to say that 2 years in a row. Who knows?
Yeah. No, it's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Hopefully, if it is health related, Mr. Iwata gets well. But if not, you can always count on this podcast to be around every week here at IGN. Thank you for listening.
What if we get a growth in our bile ducts?
I hope not. That's gross. But thank you for listening to Nintendo Voice Chat. We're a weekly show on IGN, but we have a dozen and other podcasts for you to listen to, shows, features. We have videos on this site. So make sure you come over to IGN.com, check out our content, check out what we're doing. A lot of cool stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, no,
You
we
wanna
have
say something?
again, like if you're into Game of Thrones, we've got our little experiment running right now called Dragons on the Wall. That's a weekly Game of Thrones podcast where folks from our LA office or even here talk about the episode.
Yeah, this week's is really good.
Yeah, this is gonna be good, right?
Well, this one that's coming up this week. It's the 7th episode of the season, and a lot of times the 7th and 8th episode is when all the action happens.
Yep.
So I think this
maybe
this
the
one's
shocker
big.
episode.
And of course,
right?
last week's I highly recommend you go back into the archive of that show because the one that previously happened was a really sensitive topic that I think the podcast just handled really well. And it's just I listened to the whole thing.
And they
It's
do
great.
this nice split where the first half of the talk is usually for fans who have seen the latest episode, and then the second half is the spoiler if you've read the book kind of episode. So
okay.
they set it up really nicely. Of course, Jose is often on the Fire Team Chat podcast, all about Destiny, right?
right.
We like
and they,
our little
and they talk about
podcast.
Splatoon on that too, right?
You do?
No, but we're going to
But
be
you
talking
guys
a lot
are all
about...
playing.
No, we're going to be talking a lot about House of Wolves, which just came out this week. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Feels like Bungie is sort of learning, thank God, because Dark Below was a major disappointment for a lot of us. And if you like our podcast, you can leave us feedback. Firstly, you can email us at mvc@ign.com. And if not, you can head on over to iTunes and also just leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show.
What happened to the NX predictions? When are we going to do those?
Next week, I promise.
People are
I
asking.
didn't want to have Chris sit through
Okay,
that.
that's
Unless
good.
Chris I didn't prep Chris for this.
I'll tell you what it's gonna be.
All right, let's
right.
hear it. Chris Kohler.
It's going to be
NX predictions.
NX is going to be a portable that docks. NX is going to be it's going to be
We're
it's going
also
to be it's going to be a
unoriginal.
portable it's going to be a portable machine. I don't know if it's going to be you're not going to put Wii U discs into it, but it's going to be really really easy to port Wii U software to it. So you're going to play Wii U software on this portable, and then you're going to take it home and you can plug it into your TV, and the games can be home games. That's what NX is. But NX is really a platform, and they're going to introduce various versions, like just a home version or just a portable version. But yeah, that's what the first one will be.
Okay.
It'll dock at home.
There you go. Done.
Nice.
I'm buying.
Put on
the
that's
marker.
it.
I'm buying one.
Everybody on this hybrid console thing.
I'm going
yeah.
with a 3-screen handheld.
Nintendo
3DS?
cannot have two totally separate platforms
4DS.
anymore.
Yeah. No, I think I see that.
It doesn't have the resources to have a Game Boy and an NES anymore. It has to all has to be one.
Or it would if it would just make a box that third parties want to make games for. Which
Well,
at the end of the
that's
day compounds the problem.
You know what? They should if they can't make one box that third parties don't want to make games for, they shouldn't be making two boxes that third parties don't want
I'm
to make
glad you
games
said that
for. Just
only
the one.
because a lot of people don't realize that happened with 3DS, right? Like where are third-party games on 3DS these days?
Unless you like Garfield Kart.
Well,
Is there a Garfield card game?
There was a leaked image of one. Yeah.
I'm
That's
getting
awesome.
one. All right.
there's a Puzzle and Dragons game packed in with Puzzle and Dragons Mario. That's a third-party game.
Oh, yeah,
They heard
there
you
go.
like Puzzle and Dragons, so
Yeah.
they put Puzzle and Dragons.
Put
in
them
Puzzle and
together.
Dragons. Yeah.
All right.
I
cool.
also just really quickly wanted to give a shout out to the NVC Amiibo group on Facebook, which is just a total riot, and I really like hanging out there. So.
Cool.
Excellent. All right. Great. Well, then that's our show. You can find us on Twitter. You can find Per Schneider at.
Pair IGN.
You can find Samuel Claiborn at.
Samuel
And
_
you can
IGN.
find Wired's Chris Kohler at.
Kobun Heat, KOBUNHEAT.
And
What's
you
a Kobun?
It's a surf bot.
There you go.
Yeah.
and heat is heat. And lastly, you can find me, Jose _Otero on Twitter. Thank you very much for listening, and we will be back next week with more Nintendo Voice Chat.